This particular issue in the migration experience, home and away, or where is home, has always been uh, essentially part of my own experience, and I suppose part of every Colombian's experience as well. Uh, because one of the aspects of being a missionary or being a migrant is that you have to leave home. And it's something that only begins to hit people after they have left and after they have arrived someplace else. And a lot of people think that migration is an external journey. In other words, it's getting from here to New York or London or Munich or Beijing or someplace like that. Well, in actual fact, it is that, but it's also then that's the outer landscape. Then a journey in the inner landscape has to take place. In other words, a lot of emotion begins to, if it hasn't already begun on leaving, begins to come to the surface, and a person is caught between home and away, and I suppose you could say it's a stage of confusion, homesickness, disorientation, and asking the question, well, where am I now? Because at the end, essentially, migration is the human heart on a journey of hope. And while you read, for example, in the Irish Times, people nowadays think that return is easy because distance has died. Return is not easy, and people are in danger of hanging between two cultures, between home and away. Now, the same thing happened in England in the 50s. Irish people were given the impression in the 1950s by the institutions of Irish life, church and state, that immigration was of a temporary nature. And immigration, particularly to Britain, was of a temporary nature. And the assumption was, the message was, look, you'll be back in a few years. So people went away with the idea that they were in England only for a short while, to get a job, make a bit of money, and then come back and get a job here. The result of that was that people weren't putting down roots. Now, what happened was that people didn't realize that they were getting older. They were 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and in the normal procedures, they were falling in love, getting married, and they were renting property rather than maybe investing in property. And Eamon Casey was wise enough to convince them, even if you are going to return soon, the best thing to do is, in the here and now, is to invest in a property, whether it's an apartment or a flat or a house or council house or whatever. And in the event that you will return, you will have an asset for sale to enable you to invest and start a new business on return home to Ireland. And for a lot of people in that immigration experience, they decided that they were always going home. And it happened, for example, when I was working, I'll give you an example of that. In the 80s, I was asked by a friend of mine who was the executor of an Irish doctor's will, who went to England in 1947 because of the shortage of doctors in England as a GP just after graduating from university. And he was always going home. And eventually in the 1980s, he died. But he remained single all his life because he was always going home. And he died in the 1980s, and the request in his will was that his ashes be deposited in the Irish Sea, halfway between Ireland and England. So this lady called me up, and she heard I was going to Ireland, and she asked me, could you do it? And I said, sure. So I remember arriving at the port in Holyhead, and I had the ashes in the boot of the car. I had also a wedding dress, and I had also an outboard motor for a seasonal migrant. And I remember the security officer asked me, he said, "What you got here?" I told him what I got. And he said, "Extraordinary." But that was the thing, that people were trying to hang between two cultures. And the same is happening now, because the perception is that we are not far from home because of the internet, because of Skype, and because of modern communications, and because of the fact that you can get from one end of the world to the other in at least 24 hours anyway. So I get the impression now, just as the same in the past, that people aren't processing this whole tension between home and away. People are assuming that it's easy to come back. As we all know, it's not easy to come back. It's not, even if you're only 3 years away, you have to readjust in the same way that you had to readjust when you left, and go through the whole process of reinventing yourself in a new situation, and also forming a new community, so that you're able to say to yourself someday, I'm at home where I am. Now, I always, since from my own experience as well, in the Philippines, and I'm sure it's here in Korea and many other colonies as well, that a time came when I no longer needed the Chum Herald, the Connaught Tribune, or any Irish newspaper or input. That, in other words, you become integrated into the life of the community around you, and those events and that are happening there take precedence over what's happening elsewhere. And I always felt that you can't hang between home and away. It's a dangerous situation to be in. Now, a few years ago, when I read Dino Mengistu's book, which I've quoted in that article, he's an Ethiopian immigrant in America, brought there by his parents as a 3-year-old child during the Ethiopian Revolution, after Haile Selassie was ousted. And he's been always trying, he's a writer now, but he was always trying to come to grips with this whole business, where's home? And he wrote a book. Now the book is, the title is a bit off-putting, but there's a new title for it now, I believe. The original title was Children of the Revolution. But a lot of people wouldn't have understood what Children of the Revolution meant, or what revolution it was. And I think that there's a new title to it now, but he quotes his father at the end of it. He says, "A bird cannot hang between two branches. Its wings get sore and it drops." And then he says, "A person cannot hang between two cultures. A person who hangs between two cultures lives and dies alone." And I think that the big challenge in the present day for immigrant chaplaincies, for the church, at home and away, is to try to, and also for other agencies and institutions in the migration world, is to enable people and to support people and to affirm people to cope with life where they find themselves, so that they will be able to say to themselves sometime, someday, somewhere, I'm at home where I am.